All right, everyone, we are in for a real treat, and it's a special treat for me because I don't know about you, but when I was in college, I was obsessed with the Today Show. I was like, Katie Couric, that's it. That's what I want to be. She's smart, she's funny, like, that's it. And I applied for a job at the Today Show, and I got rejected. But crazy things happen, and later in life, I was lucky enough that Katie got to host a documentary I was producing, and pinch me now, like every time she texts me, I go, oh my God, it's Katie Couric. So it is such a thrill to have her here tonight, and actually 4 years ago, some of you may remember, tonight we're calling this the Makers Primary in honor of the New Hampshire primary that's tomorrow. But 4 years ago, it was the Makers Caucus. And Katie was up here and went live to the caucus. So without further ado,
please welcome Katie Couric.
Sorry, hi, good evening. Nice to be here. Okay, you all, I know you're still eating, but try to eat a little bit quietly. We had to kind of start a little earlier than we thought. We're gonna talk about something that nobody's talking about these days, politics. And we've got a great panel, we've got some great guests, so let me get right to it. First, Lydia Polgreen is the editor-in-chief of HuffPost. Hi, Lydia. Hi. Before joining HuffPost in 2016, she spent nearly 15 years at the New York Times, where she led an initiative to expand its audience outside the U.S. and also served in various leadership roles. She was a 2006 recipient of the George Polk Award for Foreign Reporting. Nice job, Lydia. A 2008 recipient of the Livingston Award for International Reporting. And in 2007, she was named a Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum. Please give Lydia a hand, everybody. Next up, Brittany Shepherd. Come on down or up. Brittany is the national politics reporter for Yahoo News. She is the host of a new young voter show called Hot Mic with Brittany Shepherd, a political interview series. She's a member of the National Association of Black Journalists and one of the youngest active members of the White House Correspondents Association. Okay, this is gonna be so fun. I'm super excited to have you both here, but there's a lot going on, and we're gonna go straight to New Hampshire because I heard there's something happening there tomorrow. Ruth Marcus is joining us from Concord. Hi, Ruth, how are you?
Hey.
Nice to see you. The wonders of modern technology. So let me give a quick intro for you, Ruth, because I'm so proud of you as well. Ruth is a columnist and deputy editorial page editor for the Washington Post, my hometown newspaper. Since 1984, she's covered campaign finance, the Justice Department, the Supreme Court, and the White House for the Post. She is also author of the new book, I'm putting in a plug here, Ruth, Supreme Ambition, Brett Kavanaugh and the Conservative Takeover, which just came out. And she was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize for Commentary a few years back, and she's joining us tonight from Concord, New Hampshire. Ruth, hi.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Okay, so, all right, let's get right to it, Ruth. There's a lot riding on New Hampshire, especially after the Iowa shit show. This is not being streamed, but we can talk normally here. So, and don't tweet that, please. Okay, can you tell us what the mood is like on the ground in New Hampshire for voters and the candidates the night before the primary? Who's up, who's down, who may be sadly on their way out?
So in order, the mood on the ground is really unsettled. I think it's partly a function of the number of candidates in the race and the real potential for divisions, especially in what you might call the moderate lane among the different candidates. So on the left-hand side, and the person who will likely do the best tomorrow, Bernie Sanders, the senator from Vermont, seems likely to have the first position in the race. But with some competition from Elizabeth Warren, who's not doing as well. But in the other category, it's actually even a little bit more competitive than we imagined it was going to be. Vice President Biden kind of sinking-ish, and there's been a lot of discussion among reporters here about whether he would be in fourth place, maybe even in fifth place. That would be just disastrous, and to be kind of blunt about it, a little bit embarrassing for somebody who was the vice president of the United States and who had been seen as the leading candidate for so long, and particularly embarrassing and painful for the vice president after his poor showing in Iowa as well. But one of the things that's been a bit of a last-minute development here has been the rise since her really impressive performance, I thought, on Friday night in the last presidential debate before the primary of Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar. She's moved into third place in some of the most recent polling and could actually exceed one of the other neighboring senators, Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren. But one of the things that has struck me as I've gone around the state over the last several days and spoken to voters is just how up in the air they are, just how undecided they are. And I think that's a function both of the number of candidates, though they're not thrilled with any of them. It's like kind of a Goldilocks thing. None of them are just right, and they're trying them on, and none of them fit particularly well. But it's also a function of the stakes that are at issue. Just about half a block from the hotel where a lot of us have been congregating during the day, and people have been shuttling in and out, was an enormous rally that President Trump held with people lined up around the block for hours before the rally started. This could be a very competitive state in November. And I think the combination of the size of the field, people's not total thrill with all of the candidates. I think the voters who are the most enthusiastic are actually the Bernie supporters. And the stakes in November really makes this a primary that feels as fraught and undecided and consequential as any one that I've covered.
Hey, Ruth, Mike Bloomberg isn't on the ballot, but so far he has spent $300 million, right? Is he making any headway? Are people talking about Mike Bloomberg in New Hampshire?
I have not heard a ton about Mike Bloomberg from voters in New Hampshire because he hasn't been here. He's not on the ballot here. He's not competing here. But reporters are talking a lot about him, and reporters are talking a lot about him for a very good reason, which is after spending this extraordinary amount of money, just absolutely unbelievable amount of money, he has moved up significantly in the polls. So on the national level, not in New Hampshire polls, but on the national level, he's clearly going to be a force to compete with after this spate of the first four primaries, when he can just shovel this ton of money. I think, did you say we were allowed to say shitload?
Yeah, go ahead. I said shit show, you said shitload.
Shit telephone over here.
Bad language before such a big audience.
I know, it's fun, isn't it?
Shovel like shit ton of money.
Look what feminism has done for us.
Yeah, we can curse just like men.
It's already having an effect, and one of the more interesting effects that it seems to be having is on his support among African American voters. There was a new poll that came out today, which shows not only that he's moved into the first top tier category of candidates, but also that his support from African American voters has increased dramatically, and guess whose support has decreased dramatically? Vice President Joe Biden's. That's really important because, as everybody there I'm sure knows, the fourth contest, what the Biden campaign has described as his firewall, is in South Carolina, where an extraordinarily large percentage of the Democratic electorate is African American. And Vice President Biden's support among African Americans has been so much greater than anybody in the field, and it's still greater than anybody in the field according to this poll, but he's lost about 22 points in the last month or so.
So wait, Ruth, were you saying that Mike Bloomberg's support among African American voters has gone up, or?
Has gone up substantially.
Yeah.
This fascinating and to some extent surprising, since, as everybody will remember, one of his signature policies as the New York City mayor was the stop and frisk approach that was so controversial and left so much bad feeling among African Americans in the city. He has apologized for that. He has said some years later that it was a mistake, and he's been on a campaign, literally, to increase his support among African American voters, to talk about policies that he would put in place, to economic policies and racial justice policies that would appeal to African American voters. And this is the first significant illustration in polling terms that he is having some success with that approach.
Well, Ruth, I think your bed looks like it's inviting you to go to sleep. I've never done a remote interview in front of a bed before. What?
Please don't tell my mother that the room is so messy.
It'll be our secret, Ruth. You're so sweet to do this. I have so much respect for your career and everything you've done throughout your professional life. So thanks for spending some time with us tonight. Okay, bye, Ruth.
Bye.
Okay, so Lydia and Brittany, do you think that New Hampshire, the combination of Iowa and New Hampshire is as important as it ever was? Is it still, you think, a litmus test? There's been a lot of debate about why are we doing this antiquated caucus system. I think probably the mess that happened has probably added fuel to the debate. But what do you think of this whole conversation about Iowa and New Hampshire? Why, and particularly Iowa?
I think it's important to remember why these small states get to go first. And I think it's easy for us now to say these states are small, they're mostly white, they're not really representative of the demographics of the larger country. But in fact, it was a real innovation that came about in the 1960s that was really about trying to open up and democratize the field. It used to be that nominees were chosen in the stereotypical smoke-filled rooms by a bunch of party bosses, and they'd say, this person, it's not your turn, you get to go. And so the whole caucus and primary system and having these small states go first was really about trying to open up the field and give a bigger opportunity to candidates who could really come from nowhere. And the first beneficiary of that was a peanut farmer named Jimmy Carter, right, who won the Iowa caucus and took that all the way to the White House. I think you fast forward to 2020 or to 2016 or you're thinking, does it really make sense to have states that are so not representative of the overall makeup of the country go first? And I think that's a very valid question. But I think that if you look at what's happening in the race right now, the people who are really thriving are the candidates who have access to the largest amounts of money. We talked about Mike Bloomberg. If you had a big national primary, only someone who could raise hundreds of millions of dollars could actually compete in that. So I think it's a real kind of it's a real question of what kind of process do we want? Do we want a process that's open, that lets small states go first, that lets candidates who are unlikely, candidates like Barack Obama, for example, have a shot at the nomination, even if they don't have the fundraising prowess that a Bernie Sanders has or that Mike Bloomberg has because he's got all the money in the world.
So do you think that the Iowa caucuses are here to stay?
Well, look, I was in Iowa for a week. I think saying shit show is a really polite understatement of what happened in those last 24 hours. I think institutionally versus what these campaign wants are very different things. What the National Party wants, like the DNC, and what Tom Perez wants might not be what Mike Bloomberg, Pete Buttigieg, honestly, definitely not what Joe Biden wants. I was texting with a bunch of campaigns on Wednesday being like, are you guys alive? What's going on? And they all told me, I think the Iowa caucus is DOA. Everybody but Bloomberg, who their campaign was drinking champagne, very happy because muddy Democratic contest in the early states means early and perhaps contested convention. I don't want to say that out loud.
We're going to talk about that later.
Right, but it's a boon for Mike, especially when someone who casts as large of a shadow as Joe Biden seems to be sinking and sinking and sinking. But what's so interesting about this Democratic, not just like the country being diverse, but this Democratic field was the most diverse in recent history. So to have a state with 97% white, like New Hampshire, or 94, like Iowa, many progressive young Democrats are saying, enough is enough. Like, what about the grassroots person of color who is in a wheelchair and can't get out because they work 2 jobs and their closest caucus site is in Pearl, Iowa, in the middle of the snow? And with everything that's been happening, with even Biden's own camp poking, saying that maybe we don't even trust these results, and actual reporting in the New York Times saying that the math was not right, I cannot see Iowa being viable in 2024 and beyond.
Well,
And yet,
yeah, okay, but hold on.
We have a lot to say.
No, only because Nina Turner.
Nina's staying up late.
fly.
Okay, we gotta get.
And Nina has a meeting to go to. She is the national co-chair of the Bernie Sanders campaign. She's a former state senator from Ohio and former professor of African American history at Cuyahoga Community College. She's also a founding member of the Bernie Sanders Institute, an entity dedicated to transforming American democracy through research, education, and outreach. Hi, Nina. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Woo!
Thank you. I hope we didn't wait. I hope you weren't waiting too long. Thanks so much. Now, today, I know the Sanders and Buttigieg campaigns have called for a partial recanvass of the Iowa results. Why?
Well, certainly, Katie, and not the grassroots people that work on caucus process year after year after year. I definitely want to salute them and shout them out. And to Iowans who take great pride in their caucus, this really was a shame that this had to happen. But it is important for us to make sure that every single caucus goer's vote is counted. And our campaign certainly has seen some discrepancies. And so we want to make sure that those discrepancies are cleared up. I was listening to what some of the other colleagues on the panel with you were saying about what's going on in Iowa, and this will forever change the caucus process. The Iowa Democratic Party was wrong, and also the DNC has to bear some brunt of responsibility on putting this stain on the Iowa caucus process.
Well, how, Nina, do you think how did it affect your momentum going into New Hampshire? It sounds like everybody they put the brakes on everybody, and there was so much uncertainty. It sounds like Bernie's going to do very well in New Hampshire, but how did it affect your momentum? Do you think he might have done even better had this not happened in Iowa?
I do, Katie, and whether it was my senator or somebody else, it's wrong to keep people waiting for days, and even now we still don't know exactly what the results actually are. What we do know, however, is that Senator Bernie Sanders did win the popular vote. He won it on the first round. He won it on realignment, and that is really strong. That came out of the Unity Reform Commission, as you may remember, in 2016, where Senator Sanders and Secretary Clinton agreed to put together this committee to try to change some of the rules in the DNC so that we can have more transparency and fairness. And caucuses were one of the things that we wanted to make fairer. And out of that process came the paper trail. Thank God we had a paper trail, because I think it could have been worse. So yes, your question, to answer it directly, it did, because there was some uncertainty there that night and we couldn't make the announcement that very night. But our campaign has rebounded nicely. We raised $25 million in the month of January, and we're rolling strong. And we declare victory in the great state of Iowa.
Nina, Bernie Sanders had a heart attack in October, but yesterday he walked back a promise to release his comprehensive medical records. Why? He's 78. Don't you think Americans deserve the right to know that he's healthy and prepared for the rigors of the presidency?
Katie, I stopped wearing high heel shoes because I have to work with Senator Sanders. He's more spry than both you and myself. Just to wear Converse most of the time so I can keep up with Senator Sanders. This is ageism is a horrible thing, just like racism and sexism. The senator's doctor, his cardiologist, came out and gave him a clean bill of health. This is the American people are seeing Bernie Sanders 2.0. Folks couldn't keep up with him before we knew his arteries were clogged, and they certainly can't keep up with him now. The American people see Sanders on the road right now every single day. He just got in tonight. We just had a little concert and a little get-together of about 7,000 of my closest friends here in New Hampshire with the stroke, and it was just a beautiful sight to see. So the senator is healthy, is strong. And I don't believe that his doctor would have given him a clean bill of health if he couldn't have given him a clean bill of health.
But why not release? Sorry, I'm back at the Today Show. Why not release? Why not release his comprehensive medical records? I get it, the high heel, that's funny, and he's full of vim and vigor. But why not release them, Nina?
It is true. They see the senator every single day. Senator Bernie Sanders is fine.
That's it? That's all you got?
I'm telling you, he's good.
So, okay. All right, I'm going to move on, Nina. I'm going to give you a break. I wouldn't necessarily do this if I were on television, but let's move on. Are you worried about turnout? I think people were surprised that the turnout in Iowa wasn't higher. In fact, it was only 3% higher than it was in 2016. We just heard Ruth Marcus talk about, you see these Trump rallies and people are lining up around the corner. There seems to be a great deal of enthusiasm among the Trump voters. So are you worried about turnout in New Hampshire and even in Nevada, South Carolina on Super Tuesday even?
But there is no doubt that in order to have a rigorous representative democracy, we need people to be excited about coming out to vote and making their voice be heard through the ballot box. And that is something that the senator and myself have been trumpeting for a very long time. Our campaign, part of the difference between our campaign and other campaigns is that we really do have a movement type mentality that is animating the hearts and the minds and the souls of people across this country. So you're right, Kate, we are doing everything that we can to encourage and to push people to come out to the ballot box. We do need a very large turnout. If there is a large turnout, Senator Bernie Sanders will win and become the 46th president of the United States of America. No doubt about that. We need more turnout. And as a nation that prides itself on this, we have to do much better, both when there's a presidential election, but also when we're electing governors and people on the local level. We often talk about an off-year election. There is no such thing as an off-year election in a representative democracy. We got to be on and popping. And to get into that habit, we got to encourage people and also give them something to vote for. So we are doing our part to try to push and drive out the vote.
I feel like I've been kind of a hog about these questions because I have two great journalists next to me. And I know you've got a meeting to go to, Nina, I heard. And you don't have a lot of time, but I just have to ask my friends up here, do you guys want to ask Nina anything? I know I'm kind of springing this on you at the last minute, but here you are, and here she is.
Well, sure. I mean, I wanted to ask about young voters just to follow up with Katie, because I think the operative word in your sentence was if turnout is at high levels. But what I expected to happen in Iowa, and I host a young voter show, I was putting all my money that young voters who've been canvassed and caucusing for a year would come out and show support, but we did not see those numbers except for in certain college areas. So if you cannot replicate that outside of New Hampshire, are you worried about your viability going forward past South Carolina?
No, we did see those numbers. Senator Sanders was able to increase the turnout of voters in the great state of Iowa of age 17 to 29 by 33%. That turnout was higher than it was in 2008. It was higher than it was in 2016. So we are driving out the young voters of this country whose visions and dreams are being animated by what Senator Bernie Sanders is standing for, and we expect to continue to do this all over the country. Let us not forget that Senator Bernie Sanders got 5 million more votes than both Secretary Hillary Clinton and Mr. Trump combined in 2016, and we're going to duplicate that or take it to the next level in 2020.
Well, Nina Turner, I'd want you on my side, woman. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina.
Thanks, Nina. Okay. So, this is fun, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, so Brittany, I want to ask you about Amy Klobuchar. Ruth just mentioned, obviously she did very well in the debate. She got a big injection of cash after the debate, like $2 million, yeah. Right? And her candidacy does seem to be re-energized. So, Is she back in play in your view?
It's a great question because I feel like every couple of months I'm like, it's Klobuchar time, it's Amy time. But I will say 2 million is no 25 million, and everything is circumstantial to the highest war chest. And when you're competing against 2 billionaires personally who are willing to go into their pockets and like refinance their 10 homes and 2 planes, like you.
Well, I mean, to be clear, Trump has never reached into his own pocket for anything.
Oh, yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't even. I'm just thinking Dems. I'm not even thinking about that billionaire, right?
That's a whole nother billionaire.
That's a whole nother their panel. But you do at this point you wonder like what these folks are actually running for with Amy Klobuchar, this deep stakes question, and like there's a lot of questions about like a woman can run for president without being like, are you going to be VP? But like that baggage aside, she is running at equal numbers with Joe Biden in Iowa. Insane. Like, just let that sit in. And then in New Hampshire, she might even beat him. You wonder if she might not package that for a very serious VP pitch to someone like Bernie, who needs a sensible centrist to fill all those, Trump, Obama swing voters who all voted for Pete. And we know she does not like Mr. Mayor, as she calls him on the debate stage again and again and again. So you really wonder what her game is. I don't necessarily think she's like, I'm going to win in November, but maybe she can get a good cash out if she can.
And Lydia, the Democrats value diversity, but the leading contenders right now are white men. Why do you think we're seeing the underperformance of female candidates and candidates of color in this cycle?
I would say 2 things. First of all, I think it's unfair to Senator Sanders and Mayor Buttigieg to not acknowledge the diversity that they represent. We have never had a Jewish president in this country. That's a travesty, given the contributions of Jewish Americans to our society. It's crazy to me that has never happened. And Pete Buttigieg, of course, is the first openly gay candidate to have a shot at actually winning an election. So I think I wouldn't want to erase that.
Right.
Not that you did, but clearly that's important. But look, I think it's really, really striking that this was a field full of incredibly powerful people of color and women who have fallen by the wayside. And I think of Kamala Harris, I think of Cory Booker, whatever happened to Deval Patrick.
He's still hanging on.
He's still around, but he's not really.
You never hear anything about Deval Patrick.
You never hear anything about Deval Patrick. That's
partly why he did this. Why he threw his hat in the ring.
Well, because he said that he wasn't going to. So after a particularly stinging article by HuffPost's Zach Carter, he decided not to get in the race. Then he suddenly changed his mind and decided to get into the race. So I think what you're seeing is really a moment of kind of panic in the electorate about electability. And nobody knows what electability means. We all have this kind of general idea of what electability is. And it's all been thrown into complete chaos by the chaos monster himself, Donald Trump. We don't really know circa 2020 what electability looks like.
Right.
And I think this is a really interesting moment for someone like Mike Bloomberg, right? Because I think one of the reasons that he's picking up so much momentum is that people are looking at him and saying, hey, he's actually a billionaire. He seems to have the, I don't give a damn thing that Trump has, right? Like his response he had a spokesman who called Trump fat.
Yeah, fat, like ugly and
orange. So I was like, so I think Democrats are looking at him and being like, maybe this guy's shameless enough to beat Trump. And I think that when you have multiple billions of dollars in the bank, you can be shameless.
I think you call it FU money.
It is FU money.
Yeah.
We'll get there one day.
Yeah. So what do you think about Mike Bloomberg's strategy to kind of put all his eggs in the Super Tuesday basket? He's kind of ignoring these first 4 contests. Could it work?
I mean, a mayor of New York did it before, and it didn't work so well. So for him, Rudy Giuliani, if you guys didn't know, right. But someone like Mike Bloomberg is able to do all the things Lydia said, like kind of be the foil of Trump and have the resources to expand in a way someone like Giuliani couldn't when he ran, or any of the other people. He can just outspend, outlast, and everyone knows this is a cliche, but like money talks, and when your paycheck is that long, we know he's a very long paycheck, he is able to kind of appeal to those people who believe that Bloomberg is electable and don't want to go all in chips on someone like Pete, who are like, oh, well, maybe a gay person can't be president.
Well, what do you think? I was going to ask you guys, do you think America's ready to elect a gay president?
I mean, who knew America was ready to elect an orange president?
Yeah, or a black one. That's a gift. That's a gift, Lydia. She's a gift now. Yeah. But frankly, or a black one. I think the way that, who thought women were ready to vote until they were? Yeah. So I think that question is hard because we undersell the power of the electorate, but they're big on putting your money where their mouth is, and for those black candidates, they're like, representation isn't enough. You have to give us more. You have to prove that you can knock him out. And if you can't, I'm sorry, my money's going to Mike Bloomberg.
And I think that money is really the operative thing. And there are two candidates in this race who've shown that they have the resources to really drive this home. One is Mike Bloomberg, and the other is Bernie Sanders, who seems to have just bottomless ability to raise money, right? And so I think we are looking at a long stretch of, and it's going to be fascinating to watch, of the Democratic Socialists versus the billionaire. And that is speaking as a journalist, right? That's the race of a lifetime.
Yeah, it wasn't on my bingo card yet. Here we are. Yeah. I'm ready to
Well,
place.
What's interesting, I just want to mention what Ruth was saying about Bloomberg getting some attention and black voters actually gravitating towards him. Interestingly enough, I saw Maxine Waters last night, and I was talking to her about the politics and the Democratic field, and she believes, and I hope this wasn't off the record, but she said she thought that Mike Bloomberg was going to get the nomination, and I was very surprised. She said he was making a tremendous amount of headway with black ministers.
Yeah.
I think they actually have quite...
I went to an AME church with him. I was with Mike Bloomberg. We went to AME church, one-day trip to Tulsa, Oklahoma. That's what campaign money can do for you. Yeah. And he was super accepted. It was.
I also think you have to understand that for people of color, for black people, for queer people, there is so much at stake, right? And the main thing is to defeat Trump. And I think that there are communities that are like,
And Mike Bloomberg is building his entire campaign on that message.
He was shitty on stop and frisk. He, had all these NDAs that were, he's done a lot of really crappy things. There's no question. But at the end of the day, there needs to be, get this guy out of office. And that's what I'm hearing from, certainly from communities of color, certainly from queer communities that I'm part of, that's the most important thing.
Well, we're going to go to my good friend, Brian Goldsmith. He's under the weather. He would have been in New Hampshire. He's a close advisor to the Buttigieg campaign. Brian and I worked together at CBS News. We did a podcast together, and he loves politics so much. I always tell this story. He got grounded in high school for sneaking out of his room to watch C-SPAN. There you go. So that's nerd alert, everybody. Hi, Brian. Hi, Brian. I made you blush, and I've told that story 8 million times. Anyway, all right. So
every time.
Anyway, thank you for being here, and I hope you're feeling better. So how is it looking for Pete in New Hampshire? Can you share any internal polling with us?
I think I have the internal polling right now. It's looking really good. I mean, we've had amazing crowds everywhere we've gone, record crowds in pretty much every city over the last 3 days. More than 10,000 people have gone to meet Pete. A lot of people seeing him for the 6th or 7th time, shopping very vigorously, or vigorously, as they say in New Hampshire, doing some comparisons. But we feel really confident.
Are you worried, Brian, at all about Amy Klobuchar chipping away some results, some votes from Pete? Because now she is, obviously she has been squarely in the moderate lane, and she just got a big infusion of cash. People are giving her a second look, really, perhaps for the first time. How concerned are you about her ascendance?
All we can really do is run our race. Other candidates are going to go up or down. We can't really do anything about that. We have a wealth of extraordinary candidates on the Democratic side. which has, led some voters to kind of go back and forth a little bit, comparing and contrasting. We're going to stick to our message the last couple of days, which is unity, not division, a new politics, and breaking from the past. Pete represents the formula that Democrats have used to win elections over the last 50 years. You think about the 3 Democrats who've won elections during the last half century: Carter, Clinton, Obama. They were all next generation candidates. They were all Washington outsiders, not the establishment candidate. They all ran on a promise of change, particularly generational change. So at a time when people don't want to take a risk, as Lydia was saying, maybe the riskiest thing you can do is go with the kind of establishment or old guard kind of candidate.
Meanwhile, speaking about establishment old guard candidates, Joe Biden has intimated in recent days he may consider having Pete as a running mate. How does Mayor Pete feel about that?
He takes it in the spirit in which it was intended.
All right, and I have to ask you a couple more quick questions, Brian. The vice president's campaign seems to be looking to South Carolina, as we heard Ruth talk about, as a firewall, because I guess until we heard that he's gone down in black support, he is popular among black voters. But that is kind of Pete Buttigieg's weak spot. A lot of people thought that during the debate on Friday, he kind of whiffed on that question about the rise in black arrests for marijuana possessions during his tenure as mayor. So what is he doing to get more traction among black voters?
Well, he's put out, first of all, the most comprehensive plan of any candidate for the empowerment of Black America. Not just dismantling racist systems and structures, but actively promoting Black entrepreneurship, Black health, Black small business, transforming the relationship of the Black community with police and the criminal justice system. And so we feel very good about our plans. The African American voters who know him best in South Bend are supporting him most. He's got tremendous support from voters of color where he's from. Not everyone, but most. And a number of those folks are hitting the road. They went to Iowa and told the story of how Pete dramatically cut Black unemployment and Black poverty in South Bend over a period of 8 years. And that's one reason that we came in second among voters of color in Iowa. Not a huge group, but we were pleased to do as well as we did with voters of color there. So we're just going to keep talking about our record, talking about our plans. And, I think there's another element that probably isn't discussed as much, which is that voters of color have felt the pain of the Trump presidency more acutely than white voters. And so they're very pragmatic about this. They're looking at who's the candidate best positioned to beat Donald Trump. And our view is that you prove you can win by winning. We won Iowa. We're positioned to do very well in New Hampshire. And we think that a lot of voters are going to take a look at Pete once he can prove that he can win.
All right. Well, Brian, thanks for talking with us. Have some NyQuil and call me in the morning.
Will do, Casey. Thanks very much.
Okay. Thanks, Brian.
Since we're at Makers, Katie, and I don't mean to usurp your anchor
please.
rights.
Go for it.
I feel like we need to talk about Elizabeth Warren. Look, she came in third in Iowa. She has been a consistent, powerful voice in this campaign. There was just a piece about her, I forget where it was published, but I read it today, where she basically said, look, if my ideas become the center of the Democratic platform and I lose the election, I'll be the first to lead the parade to victory. And I think that given that this is Makers, and given that we basically have not talked really about any female candidates other than Amy Klobuchar, who did not come in third, I just think it's important for us to take a moment and talk about the fact that Elizabeth Warren has actually run a really incredible race. She is a person who just based on those comments, has showed a kind of selflessness that I think is really her trademark. This race is clearly not about her personal ambition, but is about the ideas that drive her and have driven her throughout her career. So here at Makers, given that we're not on TV, I just wanted to make space for that.
No, I think it's great. But the thing is, don't worry, I had Elizabeth Warren.
I know you did.
But I want to know. I mean, Brittany, she was flying so high. Even it was like 6 weeks ago.
Yeah.
This shows you just how tumultuous this political season is. What happened? Why did her campaign start to unravel? Was it the debate? Was it Medicare for all? I mean, where did you see sort of a crack in the armor? Because she really had the wind at her back for a while.
It's such a good question because you could point to a couple different inflection points in all of these candidates' careers. Everything turns on the dime. I could check my phone in an hour and something could be completely different. But I wouldn't say it's Medicare for all because Bernie is out here with the fiercest in a very real way, and it's not that he's not getting a similar kind of scrutiny. I think that conversation in the media changed when the story came out on CNN about this dinner. And people.
Oh, the Bernie.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Warren dinner.
Because, and then I don't know if this is kosher to say, but half of these candidates doing well is the media coverage around them. Mm-hmm. So when Liz announced, it was wonderkin, look what she's doing for the party, and in all of that, very well deserved for what she was doing up on the Hill.
You call her Liz?
I call everyone by their first name. Yang is Andrew, Mr. Vice President.
Liz, I like it.
Yeah, Biden is Mr. Vice President, but everybody else. But, she was making significant strides in media strategy. And then suddenly there's muddled conversations about what actually happened during the dinner. And I don't want to get too much into litigating that because who knows, we're past that as a news cycle. But you saw reporters becoming more cynical. The oppo has gone up seriously. And again, the other third that you guys don't see is the oppo were pitched on the Daily about all of these candidates. And I think people started publishing it. And she is not someone to go negative. We saw this Biden ad with Pete. I don't know if you guys saw it, but Biden was Pete did great for South Bend. He changed the sidewalks, which again.
He changed the rules for animals in shelters.
Yeah.
And while Joe Biden was negotiating the Iran nuclear treaty.
Yes. Right. That's definitely a lot more than a subtweet. It was a very definitive attack ad. I know the campaign's saying it's not an attack ad, but listen, I wasn't born yesterday. I'm young, but I wasn't born yesterday. So all of that to say is I think that Warren won't go negative because that's just not her style. And then because of that, then people can just punch her down. And that could be her downfall. But coming third in Iowa, equal with Joe Biden is still not a bad feat.
No, I mean, there is an old truism, right? There are only 3 tickets out of Iowa. And she got the 3rd ticket, but everybody's still talking about Joe Biden, who came in 4th. I mean, I think there's a word for that. It starts with S and it ends in N.
Yeah.
Right? I'm sorry, but it just is.
I want to ask quickly about Andrew Yang, just because he's so fascinating. I know that, Brittany, you followed him on the campaign trail.
Yes.
A lot of people are surprised that he's still in it, while candidates as Lydia mentioned, Cory and Kamala Harris, 2 senators have dropped out. So what do you think the appeal is? Why does he have such staying power?
When you talk to voters at Yang Gang events, they are a lot of Trump voters who like an outsider. And Andrew is someone who speaks very plainly. He's not very media savvy. He's kind of an awkward interview, and something about that is endearing to them. Not to mention people like the idea of getting $1,000 a month. And in a very selfish way, but also I spoke to many people who were on Social Security, and that system has not necessarily worked out for them. And so they want Social Security reform, but don't want to go as far left as Bernie and Liz. And UBI, Universal Basic Income, which is the apparatus in which you would get $1,000 a month, is not conditional on how much money you make, where you live, how many children you have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that kind of idea of security from an outsider who doesn't mind paying a lot of other people to be around him, tell him that it's the right thing to do, is appealing.
Do you think he can just hang in there through Nevada, South Carolina?
I think you mean, can he just yang in there?
Oh, she's the walking gift machine. That's why she's the boss. Like I said before, I think if you can raise money, it's important. But I wanted to mention this earlier, and I'm sorry to take too much airtime, but like we talk about black voters.
Never apologize, Brittany.
Thank you, Lydia. We talk about black voters in this like weird monolithic way that's like one big black brain being, yes, do this, no, do that. Like, no. And black voters are split young and old, and Yang is making some pretty, I don't want to say significant, but decent headway with young black voters, and I call this like the carpool caucus. Young voters have the ability to talk to they have a lot of free time, they have no children, they can talk to their teachers, friends, grandparents, yada, 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 and kind of force them to do turnout. Bernie has seen this, but isn't necessarily all the way there. If Yang can hold on to that, I think he's there to South Carolina. Past Super Tuesday, I don't know, but I think he's in for a Yang surprise.
Well, it is very interesting because, well, by the way, you guys get your phones out because we're going to be doing a little primary of our own right here in this room. So to participate, get out your phones and text, is it here? Yeah, Makers Events 121 and then 22333. We're going to ask 2 questions. And you have to enter the letter that corresponds with your answer. And while you guys are getting that set up, I mean, the same is true actually of Latino voters. I think it's very interesting that generationally you get a big split. You know, I used to live in Miami, so I covered the Cuban community a lot, and you know, from older voters versus younger voters. So you're absolutely right. You know, a lot of these voting groups are not monoliths. But having said that, I want to ask you about what James Carville said on Saturday that got a lot of attention about the Democrats are screwed if they really get too into identity politics, that they're not talking about the real issues that average Americans care about. Now we're okay. Well, hold on. So you know, last week people say it was the best week for the president since the election, the worst week for the Democrats since his election. So you know, how concerned should Democrats be, and are the candidates, in your view, talking about the right things?
Real talk. Repeat after me. All politics are identity politics. We have lived in a society in which the default is white male power, and in that society we have an assumption that the everything that serves those groups is what matters and is what is important, right? So this idea that suddenly you have a group of people who are disempowered, who suddenly are asking for power, that's now quote unquote identity politics, erases the fact that the people who had power had formed power on the basis of identity anyway. So that's the end of my TED Talk. But I think it's really, really important to remember that all of these candidates are actually talking about issues, right? I am not seeing a Democratic campaign, any of the campaigns, frankly, that are not hyper-focused on healthcare, on jobs, on the issues that supposedly matter to whatever it is that we define as real Americans. I mean, I think if you were to look up in a dictionary like what a real American is, you're not going to see a picture of James Carville, political operative who's lived in Washington his entire career. Nothing against the guy, but honestly, like, how does he get to decide who's a quote-unquote real American?
And why do you think he said that, Brittany?
Why did James Carville say what he said? I think because operatives need to get paid and they like their name and stories, but also that I think that there is a political class. I don't like to say the word establishment because I think the establishment has changed to what Bernie and Liz are, but that are scared of new ideas or things that might damage them personally. That's totally fine, and that's their prerogative as voters and Americans. But those are the people who are shaking the trees of like, no, Obama's not ready for Bernie, and that might very well be true, but that's why you see, again, with this Oppo pitching, a flood of stories about like DC and these capital D Democrats aren't ready for Bernie because that's just what establishment thought might be. That's my guess. I don't know the guy. Maybe it's a different idea.
By the way, so as you guys know, we asked the question, if the general election were held today, who would you vote for? We're seeing the results in real time. Tulsi Gabbard is killing it. But interestingly enough, it looks like Bloomberg has kind of run away with our little poll here.
Wow.
Interesting, right? Thoughts, ladies?
I mean, I think, knowing who comes to Makers, it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
That Bloomberg would be popular.
Is that a burn?
It was not a burn. This is not a group that feels the burn. It's
That's gift 3, people. Gift 3.
But Elizabeth Warren coming in second, and then Pete, and then Joe Biden and Bernie. Not a lot of people feel
No love
burn
for
here.
Bill Weld as well.
Yeah.
Come on, guys.
And the Yang gang is pretty small here.
Oh, yeah. There's one more for Bennett than Yang, y'all. It's silly.
Okay. All right. We have a second question because then we have to wrap it up. I could talk about this all night long, but we have a second question. If you've already joined the poll, no need to join again. But if you ran out to go to the bathroom or you were scrolling Instagram, join the poll. All right. Okay. So the next question is,
Someone said B. B.
since Hillary Clinton lost the 2016 election, is it easier or harder for a woman to be elected?
It's like I'm watching the caucus returns again.
Can I just say that I think this is a little bit of a trick question because, I think that what we have to remember is that Trump is such an outlier, right? And I think that the absolute and complete emergency that many Americans feel around defeating Trump has created an atmosphere where the choices seem so few, right? And one can imagine an election if Donald Trump is defeated in 2020, an election in 2024 where the stakes are just completely different, where you don't have this chaos agent at the center of it, where suddenly it feels much less risky to vote for a female candidate. And I don't know, but I feel like the stakes have been immeasurably raised by the president currently occupying the White House.
I do want to throw on a data point though that I find interesting about the Trump campaign is they're really good at raising money on things that might not 100% be true. So if you look at the week after impeachment,
Amazing. How much did he? $25 million.
$25 million on just, and I'm signed up for, the text, this is Don Jr. and please give me $100 or whatever. And I was getting them 6 or 7 in a couple of hours. And there are people who respond to that, his base. And I might be hey, okay, I'll text in whatever. And he has the capacity to raise money from his base off of things that antagonize them and things that are productive. He can capitalize on anger and happiness and joy and confusion in a way the Democratic Party right now nationally has not been able to quite suss out.
Well, by the way, if you want to have, sometimes I watch Fox just to see how they're covering things. And it is, I don't know why I'm shocked every time I cover it, every time I watch it, but it's just an alternate universe. And it is crazy to me. And, anyway, it just it makes me crazy.
Well, what's interesting about that is that it might seem to the people in the room is it's a crazy bonko thing, but they have really good ratings. A lot of people watch.
Well,
Fox.
that's my point.
Yeah,
so they're getting affirmation, not information.
Right.
As a result, they are not actually understanding facts and truth. If you want to talk about fake news, that's state-run television, really.
I think the weird thing about being and I'm an immigrant, first generation American, and I think one of the kind of strange things about being American is you can be uninformed and also vote. And I think it's a hard thing that DC has been able to oh well it's wrong, so how are they voting for it if it's wrong? I'm well that's the thing about being American, you can be wrong, you can vote for something. And I think the parties haven't really figured that out yet. So I'm just really curious how that's going to play out.
Yeah.
In a couple of months, And
I think the other reality that we need to contend with is we have a structure. We have a constitutional structure that enables minority rule.
Yeah.
And that means that, you could see a president and a party controlling the branches of government over many, many years with a smaller and smaller proportion of the electorate.
Can we just end on a positive note before Dylan kills me?
I got a question, and I've got to ask it. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
But the thing is, I'm wondering, and this is a lesson for us. When I see woman, I'm wondering, are we talking about a white woman or a black woman? Because Kamala is no longer in this, but everybody's talking about if Michelle Obama ran, she could do it. Oh, let's put Oprah up.
What?
When we say women, who are we talking about, and what is the stature of, does it have to be of Michelle Obama? Does it have to be an Oprah? Because that's a confusing question. Am I the only one?
No, I think one of the things that this cycle has taught us, and I think the last 2 cycles, is that being a celebrity really, really helps, right? I mean, like, it really, really, really helps. And I think that, in a weird way, like Bernie Sanders has become a kind of celebrity candidate, right? And he's been able to raise that kind of money. And I think, someone like Stacey Abrams, maybe she's got what it takes to build that kind of movement in the Sanders style. Or maybe it's Oprah. She does not seem interested in being.
I think a lot of people are trying to talk to Stacey Abrams right now.
Yes, they are.
But she's biding her time,
She is.
Oh,
like, I'm gonna do this on my time.
Was that a joke? Biden her time?
It could be. Depends what happens, right?
All right, we're out of time.
Yep.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you. Thank you, Katie.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you, Lydia.